Well, today I want to talk about the passage that Jennifer read from Matthew 7, which is a part of the Sermon on the Mount, so the greatest sermon given by the greatest preacher of all time, the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 7 is toward the latter part of that, the final third of that sermon. And it's a really important section that I think is highly misunderstood because it has some of these really great phrases that we turn and interpret them in ways that were never intended. And I say that because I want to explain what those are in light of the major subject. Because the major subject of what that passage that was read, Matthew 7, 1 through 12, is how can we be helpful to other people? You know, I know this is true for many of you in the room. I would say almost all of us, but I'll just be careful and not make the blanket. But I know for me, we want to be helpful to other people. It's just the nature of, certainly those of us who are parents and have kids, we want to be helpful to them. In our professional lives, our coworkers, colleagues. I'm a college professor, so I have students. I do it because I care about students. I want to help them. And so many of us are in that position. So I think what I'm going to say today is pretty applicable to everybody because it's just the nature of human relationships. We want to be helpful to others. But what's the right way? What's the right way for us to help other people? So several years ago, there was a young man named Mark, and he had come to me and asked if I would mentor him. And I had agreed. And so every few weeks he would come to my office. We would spend an hour talking about life. He would share things, ask questions. That's that whole relationship. But one time he came to me and said, hey, I want your advice, your counsel on something. It's really important to me. He said, I have this friend, and I want to be helpful to my friend. I said, great. I said, well, what's your problem? He said, well, this friend I have, he claims to be a Christian, but I see in his behavior that he's really not living it out. I said, okay, can you be more specific? He said, well, he's married and has a lovely wife, but when I'm with them, when I see them together, I notice that he's really demeaning to her. Sometimes even a little bit verbally abusive to her and dismissive, and it just feels really wrong. And if you're there and you see it, you feel it. I know some other friends when you're around it. And so he said, I've been thinking about that, and I want to confront him about this. He said, I have a couple of ways. I've really been thinking about this. I have 2 ways that I'm planning on confronting him about this. And I want your advice on which one you think is the better way. So I said, what are your 2 ways? He said, well, the first way is I'm going to confront him with a list of things that are the things I've seen that I think he needs to change. I said, okay, so you've been keeping a list. He said, yeah, I've been sort of jotting things down, the times that he's kind of mean to his wife, and I've noticed some specific examples. I've written them down. So I have this list. I said, how long is the list? He said, it's pretty long. I said, okay, wow. Second, what's your other option? He said, well, you know, in Matthew 18, it says if you go to a brother to try to, advise them and they don't hear it, then get someone else to go with you, bring a witness, if you will. And so my other option is to not just have the list, but go with another person who also feels like I do. So we're going to do that together. Which do you think is the better way? I said, I don't think either way is very good. And he was surprised. He goes, really? I mean, this sounds pretty biblical. Are you sure? I said, pretty sure. Speaking of the Bible, let's go ahead and look at a passage. And so we did. But before I jump to that, let me just make a couple of observations. The first thing I said to him was this: Mark, it's great that you care about your friend. It is, right? Because I knew that his heart was good. He wanted to be helpful. So he wasn't coming, I just want to attack this guy. He really cared about him. So okay, I acknowledge the goodness and rightness of that. Also, let me pause and just a little caveat. Assessing and correcting other people is a normal part of human relationships. And God's designed us in that way, to be helpful to each other, to have somebody in our life that can say, hey, Megan and I just decided a long time ago, my wife and I just said, hey, you know what? If I ever have bad breath, just tell me before I go out in public. Or if I've got food in my teeth, just please tell. And we do. And sometimes it's not all that pleasant, but it's better than not hearing it. And as I said, I'm a professor, so I grade papers, right? So I had to be honest. And one example of how important it is to have people who tell the truth. Back in August, I went for my 6-month dental cleaning checkup. And I have to admit, this is going to sound weird, but I went to that appointment kind of cocky because I'd been crushing it with my dental hygiene. I really had. I got a new electric toothbrush, and I was flossing twice a day. And I was getting after it. So I was pretty sure I was going to get a thumbs up. So I even told Shelley, my dental hygienist, I said, "You're going to be impressed." She's like, "Oh, okay." So sure enough, she gets in. She goes, "Hey, I can tell. Yeah, that's good. Good." And then all of a sudden she goes, "Oh, you don't want to hear 'oh' during." And I went, "That's not good. What do you?" And then see, I'm also a little bit of a tooth nerd because I know. Did you know you have 32 teeth? And your dentist, they've numbered them all. Your teeth are just numbers to them. And so I knew it. So I just said, "Which one?" She goes, 18. I went, 18. Nah. So what's wrong? She goes, "Well, let me show you." And she shows me because it's this high-powered thing. Look at the camera. So I'm seeing way too much of my mouth. But I go, "Oh, that doesn't look right." So that she has to get the dentist. They come in, they talk, and they look. Now, the dentist could have said, "Jim's a nice guy. Let's not hurt his feelings. Let's just tell him it's okay. He'll feel better. It'll be nicer. You want to be right?" Now, had he done that, I would have been left with a tooth that would have gone badly, right? Because I ended up needing a crown, which isn't great, but it is great in another sense because that fixed it. And then they relayed this news that wasn't all that encouraging to me. They said, "Yeah, the great thing about your crown is your crown's going to actually outlive you." Didn't need to know that. I mean, good, thank you. I don't know what you say to that. Your crown's you're not, anyway. So I want my dentist to tell the truth, right? And we want that. We need to tell the truth to people. And the question, though, is, how do we tell it? Number one, how do we tell it? And the other thing is, are you sure you're right? See, with my dentist, I know that's his thing, right? But in human relationships, are we always right? Do we know that we're right? So I want to talk about that. So Matthew 7, 1 through 12, very well-known passage. When Jennifer was reading it, you probably even said, "Oh, I know, that's a famous one there." So it begins in 7:1, where Jesus says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged in the same way." What Jesus is saying there, because Jesus is really smart, and he's right, when you come at someone with judgment, and what's judgment? Judgment is a negative evaluation of someone without standing in solidarity with them. It's a negative evaluation without standing in solidarity with them. So, when you come at someone with a judgment in that way, you're taking this position. So, quite often judgment sounds like this: "You need to..." Don't you love that sentence? What I think you need to do is, when someone comes at us with that "you need to" thing, what's the reaction? Immediately we bow our back. Our first reaction isn't usually, "Please tell me." It's usually, "Oh, yeah?" And that's why he just knows. You come at people with that, they're going to do it right back. They're going to go, "Well, who are you, Mr. Judgy?" Something like that, or worse. So this section, Matthew 7, 1 through 12, is all about judgment. So you get to verse 6. I'm skipping the log in the eye just for time. But you get to, because he never changes subject. You get to 6, and a very famous passage, right? "Don't throw your pearls to pigs, or cast your pearls before swine." Very well known. We say it, we use it in language. And how do we use it quite often? What do we mean when we say it? That usually means, that person's not good enough for your awesome judgment, or your awesome assessment, or your awesome wisdom, right? Don't waste your time on them, as if they were like pigs and you are all pearly. That's how we interpret it. But look, this is still about judgment. It's still about judgment. So Jesus, who's really funny, like way funnier than my jokes, Jesus, when he said this, I'm certain the people laughed. Because think of the image. I'm a pig farmer. Here I go. "Hey, pigs, time to eat. Guess what I have for you today? A bunch of pearls. Come to the trough and eat these." Crazy, right? I mean, everybody listening goes, "That's a bad farmer. No one would do that. It's crazy in your head to think that that would happen. Because what happens? The pig's going to come and go, what are these? I don't know what these are. They don't smell like food, but they're in the trough. I guess I should eat one. Okay, that's bad. That isn't working. And what Jesus is saying, you keep doing that. If you do, they will trample them under their feet. Eventually they're going to go, this is worthless. And then what? They're going to take a bite out of you. You keep not giving them food. Do you see what he's doing? Because the pearls are our judgments. The pearl is, we think our thing is so good. We think, I've just got this, I can't wait to tell you what's wrong with you. It's so pearly, you're going to love it. It's not how it works, right? So then, what he says in the very next verse, let me repeat that, the very next verse, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be open. So we read that and go, oh, that's where he's talking about prayer. Boy, that Jesus, he's just all over the map. Don't judge, and then there's the log, and then the pearl, and now it's prayer. No, folks, he's still talking about helping other people. He's still talking about helping. Judging isn't the way. He's already shown that. Like, pigs can't digest pearls. People can't digest your judgment. Don't do that. Do what? Come with a posture of asking. Yes, it is about prayer, but it's about praying to God, but also a posture of asking with other people. Ask, seek, knock. That's standing in solidarity with the person that we love or we want to help. And then the section on judgment ends actually in verse 12, which is also well known. So in everything you do to others, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's known as what, folks? Everybody knows it, the golden rule. And yes, it applies to everything in life, to be sure. But remember, he's still talking about judging. And what he's saying is, judge others exactly like you would want to be judged. He's so smart. Jesus gets it, right? And how would you want to be assessed, critiqued, evaluated, judged, whatever the word? How would you want to be it? And Jesus is saying, just do that. See, it works so well. He's just so brilliant. So how do you apply Matthew 7, 1 through 12 to our lives? First, let's just realize, when you judge, remember my definition, a negative evaluation without standing in solidarity with someone, you will get a negative reaction. Now, maybe you're in a power position and it's subordinate, like I'm a professor and my student, they don't know how to react. If I'm mean for no reason, they don't have the power to do that. Or a boss to an employee. Or Simon Cowell to some person who is trying out for singing, right? And you're just mean and they just cry, right? So that's all. They're either going to cry or if they have any kind of power, fight back. It's never going to work. Because, number two, people can't digest judgment. You need to, doesn't feel good, does it? It's not something that we can take in and process. And eventually you keep doing it. And you see this with parents who do it forever with their kids, and their kids finally get older and go, I'm out of here. And their form of biting may be just they never talk to you. Because that's all they heard. So Jesus is smart, right? He knows this is not the way. So what is the way? Instead, pray for, posture of asking. Stay in solidarity with the person. That's the seeking. The person that you want to help. It's a different posture. And if you take that posture, praying for them, asking them, standing with them, you will be fulfilling the golden rule. You'll be doing to another person what you would like them to do to you. Dallas Willard writes this in The Divine Conspiracy. Instead of harassing those near us with judgments, and that's a little bit of a strong word, isn't it? I remember when I first read that sentence in the book, I was like, harassing? But doesn't it feel like that? When someone starts that sentence, feels a little bit like harassment. And so Dallas saying, instead of harassing those near us with our judgments, we think are so pearly, we stand before them with our helpless requests. while simultaneously standing before the wise and mighty King with our requests for them. Do you see the twofold movement? The person I want to help, I pray for them. And then I come to them with a posture of asking, not telling. And that shift is so different. Changes the dynamic. Dietrich Bonhoeffer takes this even a step further with his word on praying for other people. Jesus Christ stands between the lover and others he loves. See, that's just recognition that the person that you're talking to, I have to recognize every student of mine, Christ stands between me and them. Jesus loves them more than I love them. So Christ is in between us. You recognize that. I must release the other person from every attempt of mine to regulate, coerce, and dominate him with my love. Isn't that an oxymoron? Dominate them with love. We think we're being loving, but it feels like domination. But by shifting it, right? Thus, the love will speak to Christ about a brother more than to a brother about Christ. That's my favorite line in the whole quote. I'm going to talk to Jesus more about that person than I'm going to talk to that person. What a different approach. The most direct way to love others is always through prayer to Christ, and that love of others is wholly dependent on the truth of Christ. Because again, what I said earlier, we're often wrong. We think one thing, but if we come with a posture of asking, we might hear something altogether different. So by doing so, we're letting Christ into the equation. Oh, Halsby said, prayer is the appointed way of giving Jesus an opportunity to exercise his supernatural powers. Folks, what a fantastic gift prayer is. We care about this person. We don't know what to do. We feel a little helpless. I want to help that person. Jesus is there. Way more powerful than you are. Way more knowledgeable than you are. That's why you have this incredible gift of to pray. Prayer is there for you, for each of us. And that's such a different approach to the way we look at other people. I mean, this is Christ the King Sunday. The Sunday before Advent, the last Sunday before Advent is Christ the King Sunday. Jesus really is the King. He's the King of that kingdom that we live in. And by letting him into the situation, we change the whole way it works. This happened to me actually last week. A good friend of mine, I've been good friends for about 15 years. And he said to me something in conversation, we're having a conversation about various things. He said, hey, by the way, you probably didn't notice this, but there was something, and he named something that I did. It wasn't like egregious, horrible, just something he said, I don't think you probably understood how this came across, but this was how I think it was. And he shared it with me, and as we dialogued about it, I realized he was right, and I didn't see it. Back to that beginning, we need other people who can see what we can't see. And so later I thanked him for it. I sent him a text later that week. I said, hey man, thanks for telling me that. I appreciated that. And he texted back, he said, I could do it because I know your heart. But I would say this back, I could receive it because I know his heart. He prays for me every day. He has prayed for me every day for the last 10 years. I know that. So when a person takes that posture and they tell us something and it's told it out of love to be helpful, you can receive it in a different way. So Mark's story. So the kingdom way is the better way, and I wanted Mark to follow that way because why? It's how we would want to be helped. It lets Jesus be at the center, and it allows for the possibility, may I even say probability, that we might be wrong. That happens so often for me in these kinds of situations. I assume something. I say, well, they're just doing that because of that. Because I think I'm so pearly with my thoughts, right? I know exactly what's going on, and they need to do, Then I pray about it, and the whole situation's different. So that's what I was asking for Mark to do. So what happened? After I affirmed that he was doing a good thing because he loves his friend, I said, hey, let's look at Matthew 7. So we spent about a half hour walking through Matthew 7, just like I have today. We looked at Jesus said, don't judge or you'll be judged. We looked at the pearls and the swine. We looked at the log in the eye. We looked at the do unto others. And I just said, this is how it goes. There's a better way. There's a kingdom way for you to be helpful to your friend, Mark. he's like, okay, well, what is that way? And I said, here's what I want you to do. First of all, put the list away. I wanted to say burn the list, felt a little harsh. So I just said, how about we just put that list away for now, okay? Just lose the list. Second, spend a week praying for him. You care about him, right? Yeah. Pray for him every day for 1 week. He said, okay, I'll do it. Then when you meet with him, come in a posture of asking as opposed to telling. And he said, okay, I'll do it. When he got back with me later, the result was in some ways surprising, but in many ways not surprising at all. I said, well, hey, how did that go? He said, Jesus is pretty smart. I said, what happened? He said, well, I just went to my friend and I said, hey, how are you doing? He said, I'm okay. He's like, well, really, are you really doing okay? And he said, well, not that great. He said, hey, I've just been praying for you and I just want to be helpful to you. And if there's anything you want to talk about, I'm here. And guess what? His friend said, yeah, there's something I'm really concerned about. Mark said, what? He said, the way I treat my wife. He said, tell me about that. And he said, I was raised in a household where my dad was really abusive to my mom. And that's all I saw. I know it's wrong. I don't want to be that way. But I find myself doing it. And his friend said, would you help me with that? He said, yeah. And they prayed about it. They sought counsel, like who can be helpful. And eventually they were able to find someone that was helpful for the friend. And the friend made some real strides. See how that worked? Let Jesus get involved. You come at them, they'll bow their back. You come with a posture of asking after you've been praying, and you change the dynamic. And that's exactly what happened. Look, not every story wraps up in a nice bow like that. I understand. It can take a long time. That's why Jesus is saying, ask, seek, knock, because it can be a long process with people. It can take a long time. So you don't want to say, this is going to work in just 1 week, perfect, right? So I don't want to represent that. But the principle works. It always works. It's way better than the other way that we think might work, right? That isn't how it is. One of the things that I love about being a Christian, there's 1,000. I can't even start telling you. But one of the things I love is that we're dealing with this Christ person who created the universe and sustains it, holds it together, and knows everything and has power beyond us. We get to work with that person. So guess what that means? The pressure is off of us. Just resign from fixing people. Just turn in your resignation letter. I'm not going to have to fix anybody anymore. I'm going to love them. I'm going to pray for them. I'm going to stand with them. But I'm going to let that go, because isn't it a pressure, a weight? I got to fix everybody. You don't. Jesus can. Make that shift to where you're letting other people into this process. One of my favorite Dallas quotes, and I was so happy when I was in Australia. I got some lovely things to bring back, memories and experiences, but my favorite thing I brought back from Australia was a mug. And it's a mug that I got to teach some people that Dallas taught back in 2006. He was there for a year with people, and they've taken his teaching, and they gave me this mug with a picture of Dallas, and it says right underneath it, you don't have to make it happen. You don't have to make it happen. And I have that every day at work. It just reminds me, because I somehow think I have to make it happen all the time. But you don't. You don't have to. The pressure's off. Just trust in something far greater than you, because you love and you want to be helpful. Follow Jesus' way. It's always the best way. The ushers are going to wait on us at this time, and I would ask you to join me in prayer. Gracious Abba, we give thanks that you know us and love us far beyond anything that we can imagine, and your power is greater than anything we can imagine. So we're grateful that we live with you in your kingdom, and we want to walk in your way, because it's the best way. So help us to apply this. Help us to find freedom in not having to fix, and trusting that you're with us and with those we love. For all this we give thanks and pray in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.